So yeah, welcome to all of you. I will just keep admitting people as we're talking. My name is Carolyn Webb. I work at Farm to Cafeteria Canada and joining you from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin-Anishinaabe, otherwise known as Ottawa. I won't talk very long. I'm just here to really point to Laurie to
Logging
share
into my other meeting. Sorry, go.
more about her program. If folks can mute yourself as you come in, that would be wonderful. Actually, I'm just going to mute you here, but if others can mute yourself, that'd be wonderful. And yeah, just wanted to say that we first, Farm to Cafeteria Canada, gave Wandering Spirit School a one of our national grants in 2022. Although I have been following the work that you guys do, Laurie, for a little while before that, and just always amazed about the work that they're doing there. So, Wandering Spirit School is an Indigenous cultural survival school in the heart of Toronto's East End. And they serve just over 150 students from kindergarten to grade 12. Laurie
Yes.
coordinates the land-based learning program there. And yeah, just I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to point you to Laurie to just share what they do. And one of the reasons we asked her to speak is just so amazing to hear what they do in an urban context, and it's really great to have some of those examples to share that other people can learn from. And so we have about an hour and a half today. Know that many of you will have to jump off early, but for those of you who can stay, that's great. And for those of you who can't, we'll be sharing the recording out afterwards. Over to you, Laurie. Thank you and welcome.
Hi, everybody. I hope everyone's having a great day. If you're feeling up to it in the chat, can everyone just write maybe their name and their role in either the school or food system? I'm curious to see if I'm speaking to a lot of teachers or perhaps some other folks in here. I'll start sharing my screen now and we'll just get right into it. Hmm. Okie dokie. So before I begin, oh, we're going to do this loading thing again. Before I begin, I'd like to start with a territory acknowledgement. As an Indigenous person, I have my own unique relationship and my own thoughts and feelings on this, but I have a really lovely video here that I'd love to share, and it's quite quick, so we'll watch it really quickly.
Laurie, is there supposed to be audio?
Yes,
You
there is.
you just
Let's.
if you can stop it and you can click a button to say add the audio. So um
I'm so sorry, everybody. Let's see. Uh-uh.
I'm trying to think of where that is. I think it's in the three buttons.
That's okay. I'm happy to skip this
Okay.
step. Little bit complicated. But like I said, as a proud Anishinaabe woman, I have my own unique relationships to territory acknowledgements and land acknowledgements. As you'll hear later, I'm from Doki's First Nation, so I'm not living in my traditional territory, but I'm so grateful to live and work in Toronto. On the traditional territories of many people was a meeting place, but specifically the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And I'm super grateful for those things. I can hear the music on my end. So I'd like to start off quickly by just saying a little bit more about me. Um, I am from Doki's First Nation. My dad's family was born there, and my mom's side is from Ireland. So she's second generation on her dad's side and multi-generation on her mom's side. But just to recognize those decolonial roots on both sides of my family. Both sides of my family has seen food used as an act of oppression, whether it be the potato famine or the nutrition experiments done on Indigenous people. Um, And yeah, so I have a couple photos here. My mom and I on the cliffs of Moher in Ireland, my amazing grandma, my mom's mom, who is like just was my world. I didn't realize going through my photos that I didn't actually have any pictures of my full family together. So were my mom, my dad, and I. But I've also included pictures of me and my cousin up at our reserve during our powwow. And this person right here is my great grandpa Eli. So I'm just positionality is super important to me. And just so you know a little bit more about me and where I'm from. Let's see. Ooh. So I am from Kâpapâmahchakwêw Wandering Spirit School. This is a lovely painting, actually, by the wonderful Kent Monkman of our elder Grandma Pauline Shirt, who sadly passed away about this time last year. Grandma Pauline was from Saddle Creek First Nation in Alberta. And I'll tell you a little bit more about her. So in 1974, Grandma Pauline and her then husband, Vern Harper, led the Native Peoples Caravan, which is like the Canadian version of the AIM movement. And they led a delegation of folks from Vancouver all the way to Ottawa. Over 200 protesters peacefully gathered at Parliament Hill, and they were focusing on things like education, self-governance, and health. So all things that are super relevant. Grandma Pauline in the 1970s created this school out of a need. Her own children weren't getting the education that she thought they deserved. So she opened up our school in the living room of her own home. Later on in the 80s, they were recognized as an alternative school and in the Toronto District School Board, and then later recognized as an Indigenous cultural survival school. Um, yeah, I think this knowing who came before me and the vision that Grandma Pauline had for my school, this was made as an act of resistance and resurgence, and I'm super proud to carry on that legacy. Here are some extra pictures. I just think they're so lovely. This is one of the first classes in an actual school in 1978. You can see Luana, that's Grandma Pauline's daughter, and some of the first folks at our school. Here's Grandma Pauline and her then husband, and I'm just so honored to have gotten to learn from Grandma Pauline and to get to carry on her legacy of radical teaching and teaching as activism. Why? Why is this important? Why is Indigenous food sovereignty important? Like I said, it's not lost to me the ways that food is used as oppression. Used as a tool of oppression, not just in the past, but currently now. Indigenous people are more likely to face food-related chronic illnesses. If we're looking back in history to residential school and the nutrition experiments done on Indigenous people, or even presently the exorbitant cost of food in a lot of remote communities, it's very clear that Indigenous people deserve to have access to healthy and culturally appropriate food. So, a little bit more about my program. I started teaching 5 years ago. I had 1 year in a classroom, and then I was placed at Wandering Spirit School in this brand new role. So, they were told me to combine physical education and land-based learning, and I was given quite literally nothing else. So the first couple of months were a little bit tricky, and the way that I started was just getting kids out into the land. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it has stemmed from just going outside to a full food sovereignty focused program. We incorporate traditional foodways such as animal processing, intentional crop choices, and traditional growing practices, cyclical systems. So students get to see all parts of the learning. They get to see how everything in nature is cyclical and it's not linear. From seeds to composting to eating and celebrating the food that they've grown and then returning that food back to the land. And seasonal learning. I'm going to talk a lot more about this in my next slide. Grandma Pauline, before she passed, created a really amazing document for my school called Our Way of Life. And it talks about the 13 moons of creation and how we can use them in our teaching practices. So this little photo on your right is a little turtle, and you can see each of the scoots have a different number on it. So each moon is represented by one of the large ones in the middle. And then the days of each moon cycle is represented on the outside. This moon-based system teaches about timing, when to plant, when to harvest, when to have ceremony. And using this framework in my teaching practice helps me root our Indigenous students in these cyclical land-based traditional epistemologies, ways of knowing and being. Okie dokie. So Like I said, I work in downtown Toronto. I'm like a stone's throw away from Donlin subway station. It's not lost on me that I am doing all of this work in a colonial institution. So here you can see some photos of stock tank planters. Gardening in this urban school for me is not just about growing food, it's about reclaiming space and relationships that have been disrupted by colonization. So gardening as an act of land back. Like I said, we're doing this work inside of an institution, which I'm sure you all know if you're in the food system has so many barriers and so many hoops to jump through. So using stock take planters has been an amazing way to grow food on school grounds without breaking any rules. Uh, and even though this is super, super small in the scale of the world today, this small act is a powerful act of resistance. We are asserting Indigenous knowledge in a very visible way for our whole community to see, and letting people know that these knowledges should be shared and they belong in schools, not just in textbooks and not just in the past. So, like I said, we purposefully pick our crops. It's challenging. As a school teacher, we're not here for a huge chunk of the growing season. So specifically picking things that are able to overwinter or have really early harvests or late harvests in the fall. Um, like I said, our practices are rooted in specifically Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee practices. We're growing with the land, we're not growing against it. So teaching about companion planting, pollinators, the roles of relationships in the garden, and making it relevant and accessible for students in the city. So, like I said, we serve 150 urban Indigenous students. Most of these students live in apartment buildings. They had never gardened before we introduced it to them at school. Um, and picking crops that reflect our school. So we don't just, because we're an urban school community, we don't live on a reserve. Our students are from everywhere, all the way from as far north in Canada as you could possibly get, all the way down to South and Central America. So picking things that represent our students. The food that we grow represents the diverse cultures in our school and the diverse backgrounds that we have. Like I said, I'm Anishinaabe. I'm from Doki's, so a lot of our stuff is Anishinaabe centered, but we grow tons of amazing things. So we have a mean and Gittigan, which is this picture back there. Sorry, going ahead. But blackberries, blueberries, Saskatoon berries, raspberries, and strawberries. This was from 2 years ago. And now our Saskatoon berry trees are like ginormous, and our raspberries have actually taken over 2 stock tank planters. But our mean and Gittigan has been super, super powerful. We also plant traditional medicines, so things like wild ginger, things like tobacco, sage, sweetgrass, and we have cedar plants all around our school as well. Every plant that we grow is chosen with care and connection, so we're purposefully picking things for students. Like we said, full cycle food system. So students get to see not only the harvesting and the planting, but we also do a lot of composting. We have 2 large tumble composters that you'll see a little bit later, and then we have a vermi composting system. So in the past, we've had each classroom with their own worm bin. It has now changed, so I have all of the worm bins with me. But students get to see the food decompose and then go back to nourish the garden. We love to celebrate with food at Wandering Spirit School. We often have salad parties where students get to eat the lovely food that they grow, and what a way to introduce amazing healthy healthy foods in schools. I've purposefully picked some of these pictures. Students who feel disconnected or marginalized in this colonial institution of education, or in the traditional classroom, find their space in the garden, and they find purpose and pride in their role in the garden. It invites a different kind of intelligence, so students who maybe struggle in the classroom really are made to thrive outdoors. In particular, there's one student that we have, this little photo here with the blueberry is their hand. We'll call him Kay for this little anecdote, but prior to coming to Wandering Spirit School, this student had been at, I think, like 4 or 5 schools by the time they were in grade 2 because of behavior. And when they first came to our school, it was very similar, that he was experiencing the same challenges, but through constant commitment and constantly taking this child out into the garden and letting him really take the lead, we have seen a huge transformation um, from being so difficult to regulate to like being out in the garden leading and showing so much confidence. He was always the first one to volunteer to water plants. He's the first one to notice new growth. And like I said, he's often the one teaching and leading other students. So in my opinion, the garden at our school gives space for students to lead, to heal, and to succeed on their own terms. Um, if you're looking for a couple of pointers on some things to grow, berries have been super successful for us, onions and potatoes. So I work really closely with our Indigenous food sovereignty chef, Joanna, and she is the most incredible woman who creates the wildest school foods, things like buffalo meatloaf to duck fried rice to venison sloppy joes. We're really eating gourmet food here. And so it's so amazing. Potatoes have been a real hit at our school, and we actually grew enough potatoes last year to feed 150 kids for 2 meals. So potatoes have been a real hit. And we were even finding potatoes into like November and December of this year. Oh, I'll stay on this. Oh, sure. So teaching food as a full cycle system is not just about the planning and the planting and the harvesting. It's also about seed saving, compost, and doing those things allows students to connect to each phase of the food system. Students are learning not that food is not just something that we take, but there's reciprocity, responsibility, and relationship naturally ingrained with these things. And we're now finally starting to see students understand that we don't take, we give back, and we are a part of the cycle. This is one of my favorite photos. It's our kids making a Saskatoon berry pie. Food as celebration. We celebrate our harvest together, like I said earlier, with salad parties, making pies, sharing meals, or even just snacking on our berries in the garden. It brings so much joy and community into our school. And uh, yeah, staff, students, families, community members all come together. Students bring home lettuce and radishes and so many goodies to their families. And it's really amazing to see how food connects people. Basically, seeing all of your food memories brings me so much joy. And when I think about focusing my program around food sovereignty or food in general, um, I'm thinking of the futures, Indigenous futures. Um, Teaching outside and teaching about food shows me that land back can look like seed saving or putting a planter on your school grounds. It can look like a child harvesting medicine or a group of students composting their lunches. Um, this work is a living classroom. It's a healing space, and it's a site of resistance. I keep coming back to these words like resistance, resurgence. I am so passionate about this work that I do and the way that I'm able to bring back knowledge. My grandpa was a residential school survivor, and Dokis is known for fishing and trapping. We're like a big in those industries. And my grandpa grew up on a trap line, but because of residential schools, he never talked about any of that stuff. He wouldn't speak his language. He wouldn't share any of that knowledge with his children. So me doing this work is an active resurgence. This was knowledge that was lost for an entire generation. And now not only do I get to learn that stuff, I get to share it with hundreds of students. This is how we reclaim what was taken and plant what's needed for future generations. So earlier in my presentation, I showed you the 13 moons, the turtle, and I'm quickly going to show you some examples of highlights from our year from each moon month. So gardening is something that we see all year. We'll talk specifically about specific moon months and food-related activities that we do then. And then at the very end, I'll share a more in-depth look at one of our food cycles that we look at every year. So we started this year in Mindamangizes in Corn Moon. During Corn Moon, we invited our community member here, Dan Kimawan, and he taught us how to lie corn, nixtamalized hominy corn. We brought students out and we combined grades. So in this example, you can see some kindies and some grade eights. A theme that you'll see across a lot of my photos are combining those grade groups and letting our older students take the lead. Sometimes it's even the younger students taking the lead. But yeah, we taught students how to process corn through traditional lying methods. So Dan brought a bunch of maple ash, and then we used ash to lye the corn. We soaked it, we boiled it, and that unlocks all of the nutrition benefits. Um, During this moon month, we also created corn husk stalls, which is a Haudenosaunee tradition. And Marie, who I work super closely alongside, this lady right here, gave some amazing teachings about story, community, and spirit through something as simple as a piece of corn. The following moon month, I'm actually happy that you can't hear because I hate hearing the sound of my own voice. But the following moon month was Menomingiza, so wild rice moon. We had been given a huge bag of wild rice from one of our coworkers, Toby. And here's a photo of the wild rice before it's been processed at all. And in this video here, you can see one of my students, Kaya, doing a method called dancing the wild rice. So we dug a hole, we put a pot in the ground with the wild rice, and we had some clean, fresh moccasins, and students took turns trying to get the chaff off of the grain. We also did a little bit of an experiment using that method, and then we also had pillowcases filled with the wild rice, and students were beating the wild rice that way. Wild rice is a traditional sacred food for Anishinaabe people. It's actually a part of our creation story and how we came to live in the lands that we live now. We were told to keep traveling until we found the place where food grows on water. We also brought a lovely guest for this month named Mark Brown, and he taught us all about the Great Migration story and how the Anishinaabe people were gifted wild rice. In this video here, you'll see a student winnowing, so he's throwing up the grains. The chaff is blowing away as this student here breathes, and then the heavy grain is falling to the ground. So students during this moon month took part in all parts of the food system that they could. Because of the institution we work in, we're not able to take kids out on the water. So in my gym, we created a harvesting scavenger hunt or harvesting obstacle course. So students use scooter boards to pretend to canoe, and then they use little whackers to whack fluff balls off of tall water jugs to mimic hitting and beating the wild rice into the canoe. And then, like I said earlier, we're huge about celebrating with food. So in this photo on the left, you can see a lovely wild rice salad made with strawberries, blackberries, and blueberries from our garden, the wild rice that we processed together, and then some maple from one of our friends in community. And then here as well, you'll see a little taste test. So we had boiled wild rice, cooked wild rice, puffed wild rice, and ground wild rice. And I think we also burnt some wild rice in the process of popping, and we offered that to students to eat as well. Something in the videos, it looks like kids are so engaged, and for the most part they are, but oftentimes you'll see kids wandering around and doing all types of other things, but fully being in the process isn't what it's important to me. Just being around the process is powerful, and learning is kind of happening in the mess and in the craziness. This is something, well, this was my first year at Wandering Spirit School. Our elder, Jimmy Dick from Moose Factory First Nation, came to me with 2 garbage bags and just kind of said, here you go. And so I was given 2 geese. I had no idea what to do with it. I had never processed a goose before. But learning with students proved to be so powerful and so impactful. It's hard to see in this photo here, but this goose is actually hanging up on a high jump post. So like I said, we're working with what we got here. We are working in this space and we're using it in the way that we see fit. Students during this moon month as well also played a lot of goose related games. We learned about migration and seasonal cycles. Jimmy Dick also taught us how to properly process the goose, so keeping the voice box intact so that it can continue to call out in the future. So I have a coworker of mine who lives near London, Ontario. So she's doing a huge commute each and every day. And she often will find porcupines on her way, roadkill. And so she'll always pick them up for me. Students have had the opportunity to process the quills. So take them off of the actual animal and then sort them. And we use them for art. So in this particular example, we did not eat the porcupine, although you could. But we gifted the quills to different family members who are artists in our community. And doing this showed students that every part of the animal not only has a purpose, but that there's an act of reciprocity there, giving away the quills that we work so hard for. So many students were like incredibly grossed out by this, some not so much. Um, One student in particular was like as far away as she could possibly be from the porcupine, and I thought she hadn't really picked up anything. And then about a week later, she was coming around to me and she kept saying, Gog, Gog. And I was so confused because she has a little bit of a speech impediment, and I thought I just wasn't properly able to understand her. And it took her saying it like 10 times for me to remember or realize that Gog is the word for porcupine in Ojibwe. So although she seemed like she was so disconnected and like did not want any part in the process, the learning still was happening. When Yeah, even when students don't participate, they're absorbing that information. Like I said, I am what you call a city Indian. I grew up in Toronto, and so the most I ever had with processing animal was like gutting a fish at my cottage or when camping. Um, so it's just so beautiful to me that kids are able to see this now and use these skills in such interesting ways. Here's another photo of my kiddos and the porcupine and I. I actually have a porcupine in my freezer as we speak. So one of the other things that we were lucky enough to be gifted was a bison hide. We use it to explore traditional hide processing, brain tanning and smoking, and then also talking and connecting it to climate change education and sustainability education. Students played games to learn bison's historical role. Uh, we also talked a lot about bisons as a metaphor for colonization. So when settlers came to Canada, there are really horrific photos of like giant towers of bison skulls. One of the things that they said was if you kill the bison, you kill the Indian, because so many Indigenous peoples from the plains area relied on bison as a form of sustenance, not only for food, but for tools and everything else. So in this center photo here, you'll see a very strange assortment of objects. And students were posed with the question, what connects all of these things? So we have things like tools, jewelry, soap, bags, drums, and the connecting factor between all of them was that they were all made by bison. So we compared traditional practices like using all parts of an animal for a plethora of reasons compared to modern practices, and we talked about waste and environmental damage. Through this, we explored how our ancestors lived in connection and in balance, and how we can now be stewards of the environment today. Like I said, bisons as a metaphor for colonization, bisons were nearly wiped out, and they are coming back. And so I think it's really amazing to connect um, to connect these animals to their lives. In this photo here, you can see students building the frame for the bison hide. I am a huge believer in not asking for permission. I hope if there's any admin, they're plugging their ears. And I also don't really beg for forgiveness either. But students are using drills here to create the frame for the bison. Uh, Kids are so much more capable than we give them credit for. If you model and you teach them the proper way to do it, have faith in your kiddos. They will absolutely blow your mind with the things that they can do. So here is another video. Like I said, she's in grade 1 now. This picture is from SK with a giant butcher knife. But yeah, truly, truly having kids in control of their own learning, it builds a sense of confidence. Some of these students have never really had the opportunity to cook with their families or to use these tools, and watching how much confidence it brings them is super powerful. Here's another video or photo, sorry, of us scraping the bison. What you can't see is Donlan subway station is like just past these houses. So I am always so curious what our neighbors in our community think. And I hope that by having these like visible acts of reclamation, it sparks some conversation. Here's a photo of us brain tanning the hide. So I drove up to Six Nations to purchase 2 brains. Talk about admin. I have the world's greatest principal. She is so on board with everything, and I wouldn't be able to do any of the stuff that I do without her support. But here you can see students smearing a mixture of brain, soap, and water that we had boiled up onto the hide to then smoke after. Uh, Messy. Everything I do is messy and crazy. And I think half of my colleagues think that, or maybe they're not sure what we do. I don't know. I can't imagine what it looks like from the outside. But as I've said multiple times, and I will continue to say until I'm blue in the face, learning happens in the mess. Give students the power, give students the control. Imagine the memories these kiddos are creating when they're doing things like this. Most recently, for our Moon Month teachings, we did a really big exploration into maple. So students had the opportunity to go to one of the Toronto District School Board's outdoor education sites where they got to harvest maple syrup. One of my close teaching partners, Marie Godet, did a bunch of maple teachings, and we also did a maple relay race. So kids practice carrying pails of sap, water. They used antlers to pick up hot rocks, like the traditional ways that we would boil the sap to become syrup. And as they're playing, they're learning, which I think is a key reason why they have such great memories for all of these things. In these photos here, you can see we did a little maple taste test. So we have maple sugar, honey, fake maple syrup, real maple syrup, and we had students do a blind taste test to try to discern which was which. And then we ended it, of course, by making maple taffy. So these were like some really, really quick snapshots into some of the stuff that we do for each moon month. And for the next couple of slides, we're going to really delve a little bit deeper into salmon. So we have been lucky enough to work with the OFAH, the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters. And I can explain a little bit more about that later, but we like to watch salmon's full life cycle. So in these photos here, you can see my students at Etienne Brûlé Park, which is in the west end of Toronto, watching the salmon spawn. So we've done this now 2 years in a row. And each time we go, there are very few salmon and there are a lot of dead fish, which you'd think might ruin the experience, but it actually totally adds to it. Students love, this is like a highlight for a bunch of kids each year. And watching them just get to explore this area somewhat freely is super moving. In this last field trip that we went on to the Humber, we had kids bring drums and they sang songs to the fish and to the water to give thanks. And this is always like a very crazy, hectic field trip, but so much amazing learning happens here. We kind of just let them have at the river and just kind of explore. Like I said earlier, we work with the OFAH. So each year we're gifted around 100 salmon eggs, and then we watch and help them grow into salmon fry. So at the beginning of each year, they get to see the salmon spawn. So they're running up the river to lay their eggs. Then we're gifted these eggs to take care of. All throughout this, we're playing lots of, I'm also a phys ed teacher, and so we're playing a lot of games teaching land-based concepts through movement. So for example, we have a game called Salmon's Red, where a student will sit in the center and pretend like they're a salmon protecting their eggs, and plenty of other games that really help reinforce this learning. Each year, we also like to eat our fish. So we get given, or sorry, we purchase like 40 to 50 pounds of fish each year for students to gut and fillet, and then we smoke them. So students in kindergarten even have a role of descaling the fish. And kids as young as like grade 2 are given fillet knives. So it's scary and it's nerve-wracking, but giving them proper instructions, modeling the correct way to do things, and then letting them have the power. Like I said, I will keep saying that over and over and over again. Yes, give them real knives. We trust them, and giving them the knives and them feeling trusted and them feeling the sense of responsibility is so powerful. We're also big, like I said, on combining different grades. So in these photos here, you'll see some of my grade 6, 7 students with some of my grade 1 students. This year, for our smoking and gutting, we weren't actually able to get salmon, but we were gifted some pickerel. So a theme that you might notice throughout the presentation is I'm constantly connecting with members of the urban Indigenous community to bring guests in and to teach us. So for example, we got gifted, like I said, about 40 pounds of pickerel. And knowing that that's coming from a good place and getting to have that relationship with our fishers is super important. Intergenerational learning, getting kids giving kids the power. I'll keep saying it over and over again. Here you can see some photos of us smoking our fish. Things don't always go the way you want it to. I've done this for 3 years now, and this year our tarp, our canvas drop cloth, completely caught on fire. And it was a learning experience. And having the kids watch the hiccups is also important. Here are some more close-ups of our fish friends. Um, it's really interesting to me to see the progression. So like I said, these are things that we're doing every year. And when I've done presentations like this in the past, it's often come up like, don't kids get bored of learning the same things every year? But they don't. Each year they're able to take different parts of it. Some things they'll really absorb and really take in one year, and the next year they just get to build upon that knowledge. Um, Something else that we love to do is collect all of our guts and our bones and our scraps, and we bury them to help fertilize our Three Sisters garden. So talking about companion planting and traditional Haudenosaunee ways of agriculture. Something new this year that we've done is I created a salmon escape room. So students were tasked with being Nibe Ogichida water warriors, and they were locked in a room with no direction. On the wall, there were a bunch of different clues. And so students were focusing on trying to combat the three most common issues or challenges for salmon. So overfishing, water pollution, and invasive species. So when they walked in the room, there was a pamphlet about invasive species with one page highlighted. If they flipped to the page, they would see that it said carp, and there was a lock with all of the 4 letters, and they opened that lock to create or to pull out the tools to create or the materials to create their own water filter. And then on the wall, we had a diagram of a water filter. This is also something that we had done in previous years, so they kind of already had that foundational knowledge. Students created a water filter to raise the surface, sorry, the water here, which there was a little key floating attached to a pool noodle. So they had to filter enough water to raise the key to unlock the next clue. And you can see them working together here. I am like a huge hands-off person. When I say I locked them in a room with no direction, it was pretty much exactly that, with little prompting. So for example, you'll always have the students who love to take control, but something that I repeat constantly, part of being a good leader is knowing when to let others shine. And so if I were to turn the sound on here, you can actually hear a student being like, okay, I'm going to stop. I just did a whole lot. I'm going to take a step back this time. But yeah. Oh, how do we go? Here are some photos of last year's fry release. So last year, I think we only were able to keep alive around 40 of our salmon fry. This year, we got about 65 salmon fry. So a much better turnout this year. Yeah, like I said, we connect language with food and the land. So when we are gutting fish or when we're doing something like going to the river, we're incorporating our Anishinaabe language. Students sang the water song to say Chimigwich to the water. And then I also love thinking about fish as a metaphor. I'm big into the metaphor these days, it seems, but as a metaphor of reconciliation. I'm sure you guys know of salmon ladders, and there's a really great, one of my teachers and friends and inspirations, his name is John Hupfield, and he has a really beautiful article talking about salmon and fish ladders as a metaphor for reconciliation. Obviously, I'm sure most of you know that due to industry and so many other things, salmon, their waterways have been either changed, blocked, damaged, whatever else. And something that has been created are fish ladders, or those fish vacuums that kind of suck the salmon over the dam. And you can think of that as a metaphor for reconciliation. Something was done to us, and instead of tearing down the problem, we're like trying to make these fish ladders. I'm not sure I'm being incredibly clear here. I'll send the John Hupfield article for a more in-depth look. And here's again, one of my little buddies, Elijah, holding his little fish. Yeah. Oh. Um, so like I said, teaching is activism. My grandfather grew up on a trap line that knowledge was lost for a whole generation. Um, my work, the work that I do, is an act of reclaiming, replanting what was almost taking, and resurgence. My spirit name, Naniboy Ishkode Bishkikikwe, is Standing Buffalo Woman. And when I was first gifted that name, I was like, how does this have anything to do with me? But now, upon reflection, like I said earlier, bison as a the history of bison and the way that they were taken away and now with lots and lots of effort have been slowly brought back. I like to think of my work as that, and I'm able to practice land stewardship and reclaim all of these lost knowledges and getting to share them with other students. Teaching food systems, especially in colonial institutions, is activism. It's radical, it's relational. Um, Teaching is resurgence, teaching is land back, teaching is ceremony. I really do mean those things, and not saying something is saying something. I really flew by this. I drank a little bit too much coffee today, I think. But I would love to hear if anybody has any questions, or I also have a couple of activities that we could do if we want. I haven't even had a chance to look at the chat either, but um, here we go. Okay. Does anybody have any questions before I can do a little activity after? But I would love to hear maybe in the chat, or if you want to just raise your hand or unmute yourself, I would love to hear. Ooh, a great question. Who waters or takes care of your gardens over the summer? I'm especially interested in how you grow potatoes in ground or buckets. So we actually have two stock tank planters that we dedicate to potatoes each year. Um, I don't know how we're so lucky, but I really don't. I like in the summertime, I maybe go like 2 or 3 times to check up on things and water and whatever else, but we kind of just let the land do its job. And if things don't survive, things don't survive. And that's also part of the learning. In the past, I've consulted with people from our parent council who have offered to do some watering, but we haven't quite organized it. Also, in my first year, we did get a really good thing going in the summer where we had high school students earning a co-op credit to come and water our garden. What does your timing look like? What are some of these are long processes. Is there during their lunch times? So I have 40 minutes with students, which is no time at all. My K to 4, I see nearly every day for 40 minutes. And then my junior intermediate students, I only see 2 or 3 times a week to fit in their language. So instead of taking French, they take Anishinaabemowin as a second language. And then on day 5s of our schedule, the language teacher, Marie, and I completely combine. So we call it land-based Anishinaabemowin. And yeah, it's not a lot of time. So kids get to see different parts each year. So for example, our kindies are almost always responsible for like the outside compost and the tumble compost bin. And my grade 6, 7s this year are fully responsible for the vermicomposting. When it comes to like smoking the fish, for example, we have one day where we gut. And so I crammed. That's why it is a pedagogical tool, the intergenerational teaching, but it's also just how we make things feasible. We have to combine classes. I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure. Let's see. I'm not sure I see any
No,
more
that's it
questions.
for
Oh, more.
questions. Yeah.
Which, thank you. Given 50 minutes. I was wondering if you mostly set up the activities prior to the activity, such as the moose tanning. No, I don't set anything up. I bring kids in and that's their job. They are, when I say I give kids the power, and it in ways makes my life way easier and in some ways makes it like so much more challenging. But kids are truly responsible for every single aspect. They're the ones who bring the wood to the spot. They're the ones who get the drill. They're the ones who are physically lacing up the hide. And like I said, each class gets to see different parts. So that's why doing things cyclically and repeating lessons year after year, there isn't much overlap. So kids don't really get bored in that way. Okay. I did a little PD earlier today for the Urban Indigenous Education Center, and one of my friends, Laura, was actually there with me, and she was saying how interesting and how different my teaching style is from hers. She was saying how much she loves the focus and she always wants the kids to come back to her and all of these things. And for the community I serve, it just doesn't work. And that's not how I want to teach, and that's not how they want to learn. So my teaching style, it's an interesting one. If I could summarize everything in just a couple quick points, give kids the power. Kids are so much more capable than we give them credit for. Even if it looks messy, even if it makes you want to pull your hair out, which it most certainly will, let it happen. And like I said, learning happens in the mess. Um, Another thing I would really want to reiterate, teaching is activism, and especially food sovereignty in urban spaces is like so powerful. Doing this work has like truly changed my life.